Welcome to Talking in Stations, podcast about EVE Online. I am Matterall, and I'm here with the gang from Talking in Stations, Arcia Elkin.
Hello, how are you doing?
Sutonia.
Hey, what's up?
And Caleb.
Hey, guys.
So behind in the control room is McLeod.
Hello.
Okay, so today we have a special recorded previously program from CCP. We record them offline so that we can find a suitable time for developers to talk to us, which is a different time than this West Coast presentation is done. So we record them beforehand, and then we play them on Sunday, which we did a couple of weeks ago. And that's what we'll have for the first half of the show. Then we'll come back and we'll talk about this week's news with some of our subject matter experts. But first, I wanted to show you that we have this first time thing that we're doing at Talking in Stations. We are going to make endorsements for people who help out Talking in Stations as a subject matter expert. And we want you to consider whoever you want inside of the election and make your choice of conscience. But these people that are on our list are people who you have seen every Sunday and throughout the week, and you've seen them in TIS Discord. And of course, they are incredibly prepared and knowledgeable in their areas. And we thought it would be a shame not to tell you that we like them as much as you do. And we think that you should vote for them because these are people that can advance the game in the right way. So that's what we're doing. Right, Caleb, you have anything to add to that?
Only that Spot is supposed to be first. He tells me this at least.
Oh, yeah, according to Spot.
I think he's a little biased, probably.
Yeah.
So the rules, always Spot first. Otherwise you get shot by blues.
Yeah, it's the other way around now, right? Like Dark Ochre is now the most valuable ore for some reason, and Spotamain is also really valuable. So I think it's like Bistot first now, right? Which is kind of surprising.
Well, neither Dark Ochre or Bistot is running this year.
Instructions unclear, mining Crocate.
Yeah, it's a shame. If it was Dr. Bistot, I'd put him number 1, but since he's Dr. Spotamain, I guess I have to put him number 3.
All right. So check out that list. What I really like about this, and Caleb and I were talking about it, is that this is great representation from across the board, right? From wormholes to role-playing, to small gang, to solo, new player, very experienced old players, nullsec. I mean, we have it all. So that's what's so neat.
No one is competing. Well, everyone is competing with Sutonia because Sutonia has proven to know everything about the game, right?
I don't know about that. CCP Fuzzy. CCP Fuzzy probably was ahead of me. I think if you add up the points from like both of the ones that we did.
Yeah, he was.
And I didn't do the first one, so we don't know, right? We don't know the tiebreaker.
Well, and we banned him because we suspected he had a huge hand in actually writing the questions, right?
What are you talking about? Explain what you're talking about so that people know.
The birthday stream they did, where they did this quite entertaining quiz show with questions about everything in the game. I think it was Sutonia and Ashtarothi and Fozzie basically battling out for the crown, at least for quite a while in there.
I'm just upset it happened when I was sleeping.
Oh,
yeah. Potentially, there's a lot of like US time zone people who are also really smart who didn't get an opportunity to take part in the quiz. So.
But there was a quiz by CCP. It was streamed, and you were on there against CCP Fozzie. So, but
one of the prizes was super cool. Actually, I've got it as my background now. But one of the prizes was you got a commission watermark from Lloyd George, which is an artist. He's called LGO, I think, on Reddit. He does like these watercolor ships. They're really awesome. And I don't use Facebook, but you can check him out on Facebook. I think he has a Twitter too. And I think he also auctions off some of his paintings on Facebook. So if you think they look awesome, then you should check him out because he's a really talented artist and it looks amazing.
And you got the Kestrel, of course.
Yeah, they're quite cool. Also, as Nick is pointing out, I think the quiz was just time tanked, so Ashia didn't dominate it.
No, that's just a consistent problem with a lot of the stuff CCP does, because time zones are actually the worst part about the game, right?
Confirmed.
Yeah.
Especially when we then hit daylight saving time, and then my brain just breaks.
All right. Well, anyway, so Talking in Stations, again, endorsing some of our subject matter experts. They're not really crew. They're not necessarily doing the ins and outs of Talking in Stations, but they are the people that bring in the knowledge in a big way, in addition to Talking in Stations. So that's why we're putting them forward, and hope that you consider them whatever order you want, but prioritize your way. Just we recommend that you put them on your ballot in there somewhere. Okay, thanks for that. Next, we're going to talk about the Academy. This is a new website that you can check out that is essentially for new players that are looking for a profession or a pathway through EVE Online. So they get into the game and they do tutorials, or they do some initial missions, or the Sisters of Eve arcs, these kinds of things, and then they run out of direction and they haven't joined a player corporation, or maybe the corporation doesn't offer them direction. And this is for those players that are looking for a profession, that need more information, and this is a website that gives players a lot of information, but not too much at first. You don't want to drink out of a fire hydrant, right? To get going and get on a path to accomplishing something. And it's also useful for players who want to change professions, because they're new players in the new profession. So we're going to talk to CCP about that with one of the main authors of the material, Ashley. She is known as Ashyin.space. That's her blog. And also from EveUni, we have Mike. And so he's on there as well, talking about the new player experience. All right, let's go to that video. We'll be back after the video to talk about this week's news with the crew. Thanks. Welcome to Talking in Stations. We're here with CCP talking about everybody knows it's called the new player experience, but we're going to maybe coin a new phrase today by the end of the show. We're going to talk about new players and some of their challenges and some of the things CCP are doing to actually make it more pleasant for them. And for that, we have a CCP Aurora from the community
Hello,
team.
everyone.
From the community team, is that right?
That is correct. I'm from the community team, although I've been doing quite a bit of work on this new EVE Academy project.
Great.
So bringing my old skills to bear for this.
Right. And we have CCP Tigershark. How are you?
Hi. Yep. Doing great. How are you?
Great. And we have Ashley from Ashyin.space. Are you Ashley?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
All right. And from Eve University off screen, we have Mike Kingswell. How are you, Mike?
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Our pleasure. And Aurora mentioned it. We're here to talk about the Academy, and we'll talk all about that and stuff. But before we get into the Academy and what it is, let's find out a little bit about new players and what are some of the struggles they have when they arrive at a game as big and complicated and dangerous as EVE Online. Aurora, is there any insight that you guys have about new players and what kind of help they need?
Yeah, so CCP spent the last few years kind of gathering data on new players and the struggles that they have. There's actually been some outside research done, even hyper-specifically, to kind of plot the path that many new players take and where they fall out. And we have these graphs of, the fall off. Many of you will have seen the funnel charts that we've shown at previous discussions. And we can see that the fall off for new players tends to be pretty large in the early game. And improving those retention rates is obviously makes the game better for all of us. So the number of issues that face new players is it's a very wide pool. So it would be really nice if it was just a couple issues like, we just need to fix this thing. We're good. But it's not, because as we all know, Eve is hyper complicated. There's a ton to it, and it's pretty easy to scare those players away because they kind of get thrown into the deep end with no great guidance as to exactly, how do I get started doing these things that I've heard about and sound cool, but I don't know how to get into yet. And unfortunately for a lot of people, they just, they aren't able to figure it out. They get frustrated and they move on. And so that is probably one of the largest contributing factors among many.
What do I do next, kind of thing, after the tutorials? All right, Tigershark, and this is something you're looking at specifically now in your new role as, what's the actual title? Or
brand manager.
Okay, brand manager for EVE Online.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk about what Aurora just said, like some of the challenges that new players have when they come in? And
Yeah. I mean, I sort of always identify with it as a blank canvas. Nothing scares an artist more than a blank canvas, and Eve can be a little bit of that. It has just unparalleled freedom, and it has a lot to offer to players. You can do, anything you dream of, really, and that's super awesome. But it's also scary, and it's hard to know what to do. So I think that's sort of the main struggle, and also where to look for information, and sort of how do I find out what I want to do in Eve. So that's, I think, the main pain point we are looking at with right now. Yeah.
Well, that concept of a white canvas is a really good one. I think you're absolutely right, because EVE Online is a sandbox game. You create your own virtual world. It's almost a metasphere in some ways. It can be hard to know what to do next because you're not really told like what to do next. You have to decide what to do next, but you don't know all the questions to even ask to figure out what it is you want to do. And
exactly.
In the past, CCP has basically said, look, find some people and they'll bring you into their world, into their story, into their fun, and that will become yours. And then you can do your own. But as an individual, I think it would be hard to figure out what to do just on your own, looking at a blank canvas like that. But for that sort of a problem, we had a really great group for many years now, Eve University. And Mike, you're from Eve University. What were some of the things that you guys do to help new players try to get acclimated, I guess?
Well, basically, as you mentioned, one of the big issues for a brand new player that we face is just getting a starting point, knowing where to even begin to start tackling one of the great aspects that are out there. So we try to provide new players these starting points, be it simple, small things like offering suggestions on a small skill plan that gets them out there flying a lot of different ships so they can try different roles in the game, be it PvE, be it PvP. We offer little help along to stop the grind in the beginning. We offer skill book reimbursements, so basically all their skill books are for free. We get them cheap learning implants so they learn faster. All of that to simply get them going and get them started. But as you mentioned, it's mostly about finding the right group to fly with. So we hope to provide them with a community full of different opportunities, with having campuses all around space, be it high-sec, low-sec, null-sec, wormholes. We have incursion groups going out. So basically, we want to provide the starting point for them to have a go-to so they can get going and enjoy the game and find their way of playing the game. Yeah. And, well, the most famous aspect would probably be the providing of knowledge with our wiki and our classes and stuff.
Yeah, terrific wiki. And you also have classes which you are in charge of. What are some of the classes that you guys offer for players? Some samples.
I mean, just yesterday I held an introduction to weapon systems where I went into the different turret mechanics, how missiles work, all that stuff that makes fun in big explosions, how it actually works in the game, to just give them new players a grasp of those systems. My personal favorite is always and will always be the introduction to Logi, simply because I'm a Logi pilot and we are the best. But in general, we have a great variety of introductory courses. And this month alone, I can tell you we are averaging about more than one class a day.
Wow, that's a lot. I remember I was in EveUni a long time ago when I started in 2008 or 9. I forget. It's been a while.
And we're watching our alumni proudly.
Yeah, those classes were a real draw. I think I learned electronic warfare because it was really hard to understand. And it was really neat the way they just said, okay, green color means Galente, rust color means, and all of a sudden it made sense, the colors on those things. So those classes are a nice draw. I'm glad you guys are still doing them and doing so many of them. That's a lot, one a day. Well, Ashie, you were once a new player since you're now a CEO of a Wormhole Corporation. What was it like when you started? Tell us a little bit about your first few days.
Well, it's been so long. It was back in 2012, so I can't really remember my first few days. But I do remember that I eventually burnt out and quit because I didn't know what to do, which is ironically exactly what Eve Academy would have addressed. I remember back then I did missions. I got myself a Drake. I didn't really play with anyone. I just quit the game back then. And even then, even though I'm the sort of person who enjoys reading through EveUni and just reading through tons of wikis and digging through information, I love that. I would still be somewhat lost about what exactly I could do and where I could go next. And without this resource, without a good resource, I just fell over and quit Eve eventually.
Well, before
coming back.
Yeah. This is funny because you're one of the creators and designers of the Academy. You don't work for CCP or a player, but were you, when you were designing some of the stuff, were you thinking about how to talk to your former self, like when you were starting out? Because you have a blog that does a lot of this kind of stuff on its own, right? Ashyin.space. Yeah.
So I'm quite familiar with writing guides. Most of what I did with the team on Eve Academy was writing copy. So writing the guides themselves on the pages and helping out with the scripts, although Aurora is amazing at those. And I didn't really think about it from a perspective of talking to myself because it's been so long. But in my time playing, I've met so many new players, whether I've just killed them in a Reddit site or I ran into someone in high tech who's maybe a bit talkative. Yeah, and I think the other thing that you get from a lot of older players where we'll kill a newer player somewhere in Eve, and then we'll end up talking to them and finding out.
You adopt them.
Yeah, you either adopt them.
Yes.
One of my current directors in Vauxhall is we killed him in Heron, I think, and adopted him, and now he's a director a year and a half later.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Recruitment by Blaster.
I think somewhere in the world there must be cultures that have done that in the past that Eve kind of emulates, right? Like you raid a village and you take their kids and raise them as your own or something.
I think the Vikings were fairly well known for that in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not quite as friendly as this is.
So dark. All right. So, Tigershark, when you how did this project, the Academy, arrive to you? Like, what did you decide, or what did they present you with to accomplish? Because you're someone that accomplishes things, right?
I try to, anyways.
Yeah.
You're doing well so far.
I mean, I am completely familiar with the challenge of being a new Eve player because I'm just a perpetual new Eve player. I just never seem to get through that wall of what to do, how to do it, where to go. I don't know, time. So the goal for the page and the goal that I sort of set myself was to understand the text that was written, understand the scripts that were written, make it clear and concise, because you have to strike a balance of giving enough information and not overwhelm the players with just too much that they can't absorb it. So that was sort of the goal for us, and to also inspire people, to kind of give them something that inspires them to pursue a certain career path, and simplifying Eve down into 4 career paths was definitely not easy. And it's quite a wide bucket that we cast these careers in. And there again, you don't want to go too broad. You don't want to have 10 because that's overwhelming, and you don't want to have 2 because that's just too, that doesn't describe Eve that well. So it's it's striking that balance of having enough and not too little and not too much, I guess.
Oh, the Goldilocks.
Yeah, just to respond to that real quick, is I've read some really interesting studies that are psychological studies about choice paralysis, which is a common thing. And I worked as a web designer. And so choice paralysis is kind of a common thing when you're dealing with offering your clients multiple different options of things they can do. You put too many things on a screen, or you just say, like, you can do everything, then people have a lot more trouble making a choice than when you go, you can do one of these 3 things, and then let them discover other things later on. So the optimal number of choices that you can present a person has always been just sort of an interesting thing to me, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of thing factors into the decisions made for how we're presenting the information here as well.
Interesting. I wonder if there is a magic number like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy 42, or...
It depends slightly on context, and but it tends to be between, if I remember correctly, like 3 and 6. So, somewhere.
Cool. Did that inform some of your decision making there, Tigershark? Some of that kind of thinking?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But also, you have to take into account just the game itself and how people are playing it. Like, you cannot force, yes, we're going to have 6 or 5. You have to also just use the framework that you have in the game.
Yeah. So, by the way, that's brilliant because, as we all know, the players that have played this game for a long time stick around a long time because there's so much to learn and to unravel. And even players who've been around for years still feel like they don't know everything. So to make it brief is one of the hardest jobs around, to say, here's enough to understand that there's more, but here's enough to understand something. So you picked a few professions to start with. Can you guys talk about the choices there?
I'm happy to talk about those. So the 4 paths, for anyone who hasn't looked at Eve Academy, are a PvE combat path, which has been dubbed Enforcer, an exploration path dubbed Explorer, industry, mining, all of that sort of business type of work under Industrialist, and then Soldier of Fortune, which covers more PvP, breaking out of high sec early for those people that particularly want to kind of get out and make a mess in the sandbox. I think that path particularly speaks to them. So in a sense, we just tried to, we vaguely grouped the types of activities a lot of players will do. And I think a lot of players who watch this will say, yes, I'm probably fit most into this bucket. None of these are prescriptive. It's not like if you pick one of these paths, like that's all you can do. But it helps to kind of, if this is the area of the game that you're interested in, you're particularly interested in exploration, like let's talk about, let's introduce you to exploration. Here's how you scan. Here's how you hack. Here's how, you're going to find a wormhole sooner or later. Exactly what is that and how do you interact with it? Let's say that you're looking for a little bit more excitement. These wormhole things are pretty cool. Like, how do you get into running sleeper sites? How do you run escalations? All of these sort of things that kind of branch off of that path. And then we do that for each. So the Enforcer PvE path, it starts out talking about missions, but then it goes into epic arcs. We're looking at videos on the Abyss. And then it even touches on, there's a little bit of crossover about scanning to show people how to get into combat sites and escalations. So each path is kind of designed to pick a thing that interests a person and then guide them through additional content that is related that other people who enjoy that thing will also probably like. So there was some research that was done in the background that we've kind of incorporated into this. So we can actually, you can group people into cohorts a little bit by the type of content that they usually interact with. And you can kind of figure out, you know, what content we might recommend to someone who's interested in this thing. So it helps to answer one of those initial questions for new players, which is, and I'm sure that Mike can speak to this, seeing this quite often, is when you bring a new player into a corporation, one of the most common and unfortunately difficult to answer questions that you get is, okay, so what do I do next? So, you know, they finish the Sisters of Eve arc. Okay, so what do I do next? And they get all sorts of responses. So some people will be like, you go do this thing. And other people will be like, well, it's a sandbox, so here's literally everything that you can do. And we're trying to strike a balance between those two. So these are all of the things that are related to the things that you've shown interest in, and here's how you can try to start exploring those.
Oh, I see. So here's more branches on the tree that you're climbing, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very much like that.
We also decided to include kind of goals in quite simple, easy goals. And then we had some medium and harder ones to help people also maybe, okay, I want to try that. So they have something concrete to do in game, whether it's just, even if it's just fitting a ship or killing 5 NPCs or whatever, it is something that is, what do I do next? Answers that question for them.
Yeah. Did you find that's as important as, because I had a friend that said I didn't know what to do next and he left the game. Actually, I have two. I didn't know them before they played. I just compared experiences with them. But have you found that that's a big deal?
In my experience, that is a very big deal. I was, for those who don't know, I was previously in Brave and I did a lot of work with Brave Dojo. So helping new players was kind of my thing.
Dojo was a training section of Brave. Yeah,
it's the new player training group. So one of the common questions that was kind of a litmus test of whether or not a new player would stick around, and this is purely anecdotal, but when a player would ask, okay, so what do I do next? I would say that their chances of sticking with the game through the next month dropped immediately by 50% when they asked that question. And then if you gave them some options and they were like, not really sure, their chances probably dropped to 1%. So that was something that I saw a lot of. And so it's that goal setting challenge that makes EVE particularly difficult for new players. So the players that do stick around with EVE are the ones who've learned how to set goals for themselves or have joined a corporation that they're willing to accept goals from. So it's one of the two. So they're getting goals from one way or the other, whether they're self-created or handed to them by their allies. We're trying to help improve that. I mean, the ability to set your own goals is incredible, and everybody watching this who has managed to do that should be super proud of themselves. But for everybody else, that's maybe 20% of the population. For everybody else that struggles with that, they hit the sandbox and they're like, I've shoveled a couple times, but I don't really know what to do. Should I build a castle or should I build that sort of thing?
I think these goals
helping them to figure out, like, here are some goals that you can choose from that relate to the things you've done is a really good way to help hook them in to the point where hopefully they can learn to start setting those goals themselves.
Mike?
I was just trying to add that be it even the simplest goals, they add this certain sense of achievement for a new player that is intrinsically important to keep them sticking around. And if you feel this achievement by achieving the goal that you set yourself or that others set for you, that's how you get hooked. And it's hard to get something like this in a sandbox. So if it's either yourself setting them or the corporation or now the academy suggesting them, that's another avenue of getting this sense of achievement to actually get something done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something, if you're ever in HiSec during one of the events, like the current one that's ongoing, there's a ton of activity with people scrambling, trying to get into these new resource wars sites that have been kind of reworked and brought back. That's kind of what you're seeing there. You'll see a lot of new players that are trying to figure out how to achieve the goals that are set for them in the event screen on the left-hand side of their screen, because it's right there. And it's a goal that they don't have to figure out for themselves. It's just given to them. So there's a lot of energy that goes into creating your own goal. And if you can see a goal very clearly, it's like, yes, that's the goal I should go try to do. And then it results in, a lot more interaction with those players who are trying to do those things.
So more runway for you too to stick around, right? Because you have a thing that you're working towards. So there's always a reason to come back. It just must be critical for what you guys are doing for new players. So a little side question here: is there any deprogramming that you have to do for players that have played other video games, that are experienced with other video games, even other MMOs, and they come to EVE Online and it's not a playground made for them, it's more of a sandbox? Is there some way that do you even have to face that challenge, or is that not a consideration?
I think it's partially considered. We have to deal with the expectations that players from other games come to EVE Online with. So there's a lot of players who have played other MMOs or other games that are very guided in what you're supposed to do. You have quest markers over heads and that sort of thing. And so what you need to do is just soften the blow so that they have a longer runway to start to learn how the EVE universe works for them. So if you, instead of, we're not going to put a quest marker on everything, obviously, but if there's, a longer period where they're having those guided steps that they're really familiar with before they hit endgame, as many MMO players will be familiar with. EVE's endgame right now starts in about 15 minutes after you boot up the game. But for everyone else, you have to kind of, slowly introduce them to the universe in order to build up the comfort level. In order to deal with that, I suppose.
Yeah. I think that's probably part of the clarity is just allowing them to know there are some paths, and they can go really deep. Otherwise, they'll be trying to take a sip of water from a fire hydrant or something. It's just too much all at once. So EveUni has dealt with this for a long time. You guys put out classes, and how long have you been with EveUni, Mike?
Had my 3-year birthday this month, I think.
Okay. Have you been playing for 3 years, or is that just EveUni?
Yeah, actually, I've started about a month before I joined EveUni, because my friends that I started playing with stopped playing, because what do we do?
Same.
And I like spaceships and I like explosions, so I stuck around, but again started looking for a group to learn anything, because it was hard starting out.
Right. So I guess my question for you is, are you finding people too, like Aurora was saying with the Brave Dojo, that people that didn't have that next goal set, that it was a big problem for them to stick around? Does that track with your experience with people?
Definitely. For me, the litmus test is how much do they engage in the possibilities that we offer them. If a person joins EVE University and instantly starts looking for one of the campuses and, hey, which one is the right one for me? I'm like, this person is engaged. They want to learn more. But we also have a ton of people that join EveUni and just hang around for a few weeks and then simply fall off the grid.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be generally my biggest advice for any new bro. Friendship is the best ship in EVE. Find a group to fly with, and then you can share the fun and you can find your way of playing the game with others.
Yeah. And the second part of that question for me was, are there people that come in with different expectations because they're coming in from different games? Do you deal with that at all? Do you see any of that? Like, hey, this doesn't work like I think it should work?
I mean, yeah, EVE is different than any other MMO. Let's just say the way of playing the game, you don't have per se the tank, the damage dealer, the Logi, the healer. We have Logi. Yes. But we try to break it down as much as we can with our beginner classes. We try to break the complex system down to an easy to understand level to introduce them to this different kind of playing the game.
Right. That's funny. Yeah, you do have the Logi. So, Ashie, when you wrote a lot of this stuff, I'm sure they supplied you with like what groups to take on and stuff. What were some of the considerations when you were putting stuff together, putting your material together, building the site, the Academy?
Yeah, so like Tigershark said, a lot of it was making sure that it's quite concise and clear, and trying to get the essence of what any particular objective would give you, how exciting it would be, at the same time as being informative and not blowing someone's head off with just so much information. Like, that's going to happen when they undock anyway.
Yeah.
So yes, from a fire hydrant, like you put it.
Yeah, exactly that. And we had a bit of a skeleton structure for each different pathway that I'd work through, and just try and get in a sip from that fire hydrant of every little bit that I could. And then we iterated on that and took things out, added things in, moved things around, and the place it's at right now looks pretty good, I'd say. And we're just going to keep on working on it, keep it up to date. That's really...
Yeah. That was actually my next question for Tigershark, is like, what's the future of the project? Is this just the beginning, or is this something you're going to wait to see how well it works and then decide if you're going to do more?
We are betting on this being a good resource, and this is just the beginning. We are definitely going to be adding content, adding videos, the tutorial videos, my goal is to kind of establish a cadence of regular review and hopefully enlist some of the community and helping us out with that, volunteers or something like that. So that we have kind of fixed points where we take a look at it and then, we leave it, or we fix it and we leave it for a while and then we take another look at it again. I think that's a more sustainable way of approaching keeping it up to date. And also maybe just, don't get caught up in the details. I want to take an example of the scanning basics video, I think it was, that we recorded it like a week before they updated and switched the screens around. I could have said, yeah, let's re-record it and delay, blah, blah, blah. But it's understandable, even if it has just switched. So it's also balancing that of like, how important is it? Is it understandable? Fine, we'll just take it in the next batch. I think also by keeping it concise and curated will also help. This will never encompass all of EVE, and it's not meant to. This is not a replacement for EVE University or any of the other amazing community resources that are out there. This is kind of meant to build a bridge to that, so that people that want to dig deeper are able to dive into EVE University and those places. So I think those three things are kind of the key to making sure that we are able to maintain the EVE Academy up to date.
Yeah. Will you grow into more professions as well, or are you going to stick with these initial branches and just grow those?
I think these are the kind of 4 professions that encompass a lot of EVE. So we are planning to stick with those for the foreseeable future anyways. Yeah, I mean, what I also wanted to add is that we definitely want to be sort of encourage the community to, take a look at the site, see if they want to create some really cool resources that are maybe career specific or action specific, and maybe you'll be added to EVE Academy.
It would need to be a very large paradigm shift for us to make a new path, I think, at this point. Because if you look at the generalization of each path, you've got like a very general PvE path, very general like business path, very general PvP path, very general exploration path. And those tend to be like the major buckets that people operate in. So if a new bucket were to emerge, I think we would obviously... It would be a very big deal, first off. But
like, what's the sixth toe that's growing on my foot? Like, what did that get here?
Yeah, exactly. Anything new to come would mean a very major shift in Eve, which totally possible in the future, but not immediately foreseen. And for new activities, they can probably fit into one of these buckets. So for activities that change or that sort of thing, we can always shuffle things around as needed.
Yeah, I guess you really just never know, right? Because there may be some kind of metaverse role that pops up, like Eve journalist or something, and it ends up some kind of fusing with the game in some way that's legitimate, like maybe a shuttle that doesn't get destroyed. And I'm lobbying on air. I shouldn't do that, but kidding. All right. Right. So then you're going to grow these. So for the future of this, you're going to look at it and you're going to look for some volunteer work. Is that going to come out of the volunteers that already volunteer for EVE Online, the ISD?
Hopefully, yeah. That would be amazing.
Something like that.
Yeah, they'll be one of our first resources to go to for those reviews.
Yeah, and that program is still going, and I think you can volunteer to help out EVE Online in 4 different ways, I think it was.
I can't quite remember the number of them, but yeah, there's a number of different places that people can volunteer for if they're interested. Yeah. So there's the CCL team, which kind of does forum moderation. There is NEC team, which does like reporting and world news and assistance with the lore and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. There's the STAR team, which you'll see in rookie help chat channels in game, helping new players. So they'll probably be the ones that we'll talk to first regarding, reviewing these pages. And there's probably other teams. Oh, there's the bug hunter team. Right. The bug hunters are usually active on CC. They get a cockroach and they get to help us locate bugs, which is always much appreciated.
Please explain a cockroach, because people are going to think that they get an actual cockroach.
We just send them a bug through the mail. It's a whole cockroach, and we're like, if it has eggs, like, please don't take it out of the packaging. So the cockroach is a QA testing ship. So it actually does look like a golden cockroach in game. It's quite impressive, but it's got 8 high slots, 8 mid slots, 8 low slots, and insane stats, and can fit literally anything. So it allows you to recreate all sorts of test conditions without having to get a very specific ship. So it helps the QAs just kind of test things a little bit faster, and the bug hunters replicate bugs without making things quite so complicated. So.
Yeah. By the way, that was a pop quiz, and I did not intend to pop that on you, but you did great. You named all the 4 sections, and yeah, total pass. Good for you. All right, cool. Well, let's talk about, let's see, we have some questions here from our staff. Some of the things that new players are trying to do that are coming in is, one is they want to find what's next, which you guys have now supplied this with. Oh, actually, I know what I wanted to ask about. The CCP has tried to do this before, right? Like, trying to get retention for EVE Online is a big, big deal. It always has been. They've done things like have an EVE wiki. So what were some of the, oh, Mike just dropped out. He'll be back in a second, I think. What were some of the, leave him in there. What were some of the adjustments that you guys have made historically, if you know that, because you guys probably, this is a fresh new thing for you guys to do, but is there any historical information you can give me on some of the things that have been tried and why this is different?
Sure, so I can speak.
I mean, I remember EveWiki, and it was quite detailed. So it was a lot of effort to maintain, and I think keeping it high level and concise is the way to go here, and more leveraging the community resources to meet that gap.
In a sense, EVE University already does the highly informational wiki to the point where, while we could perhaps try to duplicate those efforts, I'm sure that Mike can speak to the large number of people that are actively editing the EveUni wiki. and even I go there sometimes, and I've made some recent updates over the last year, just like, oh, hey, this changed. Let's get that update in there. But it takes a lot of hands, and so you need to have a lot of trust that goes into editing the system and all of that sort of stuff. It takes a lot of oversight. There's a ton of information, and keeping it up to date is a huge challenge, which it didn't work out previously for CCP with the previous wiki. But that shouldn't be a problem with this site because it's a super narrow amount of curated information. So this is very, very much just aimed at those first learning moments of new players and some aspirational stuff. So it's not an encyclopedia of how everything works.
Right.
That would be great, but it almost already exists. So.
Yeah. Well, and it also is, again, it's like you have to know what you're looking for to find it. And even if you know what you're looking for, a wiki sometimes can hide it from you. It's hard to actually search the wiki properly. You get either too much information on searches or it's not specific enough. Or if we take EveUni pages, for example, EveUni is a fantastic resource. But sometimes a new player will come along who's like, hey, how does this thing work? And they just get linked an EveUni page with like, look it up for yourself. So it's kind of an RTFM situation. And that new player opens it and they see, it's like you have to scroll through multiple pages. And if we look at the page on, I think, tracking, for example, is one of my favorite pages, partly because it contains highly mathematical equations about like exactly how this thing works, which that sort of information is, it's awesome that it's available. But at the same time, throwing that sort of content to a new player can put them into a state of shock and then they disappear. So we're trying to kind of bridge that ground where it's like, instead of linking them a page that, literally has college level mathematics on it. Yeah.
Here's a starter guide that's super simple. It'll take you 5 minutes and you'll hopefully know how to get started doing that thing.
Well, I always thought Eve was, I used to say, I play Eve because it's the professionals game. Like once you finish playing video games, you play Eve Online because that is the top competitive atmosphere in your mental capacity, because you get to leverage in your real life, right? Other games you leverage in your skill that you've practiced, but in EVE Online you get to leverage in who you are, and that's a whole different level of competition, and it becomes a lot more personal too, because that's you that's not able to compete for whatever reason. Because EVE Online takes so many different skills. You have to be, on the one hand, charismatic if you want to be a leader. On the other hand, you have to have a great idea of situational awareness and quick thinking if you want to be a fleet commander. If you want to be a logistics person, you have to have some pretty good, let's just call it spreadsheet skills or something to make sure that you're not losing all your money in your endeavors. So it takes a lot of, and then let's not even talk about third-party app building, and you're familiar with wormholes, being able to create software that helps them navigate the dark world. So there's just a lot you bring to the table, and the level of people you're dealing with are very smart. And I always tell this story, but one of my favorites moments was seeing 3 or 4 people help this one guy who asked for just a little bit of algebra help for his daughter who had a test and he couldn't figure it out. So he just asked in one of the NPC channels, and there was like 4 guys saying like, yeah, well, what you want to do in geometry is, and then all these guys were teaching him how to do math over the chat channel. And I thought, I'm in the right place. I like these guys. They're helpful and smart. So,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was great. And so I think when you come to EVE Online, you're ready to research. You're ready to treat it like a college class or a university class. And so on some level, the wiki can serve that kind of purpose because you're ready to research. I'm sure people print out books, they listen to podcasts, or they just are ready to research to get better at EVE Online. But that's not everybody, is it? That's not even...
No, it's definitely only a segment of the population, because like we discussed before, people coming in from other games with very different expectations don't necessarily have the same highly professional outlook as you have. And so perhaps they'll develop that one day, which would be awesome. But not everybody does. There's some very highly casual players that just really like spaceships and watching explosions. And they don't necessarily need the super hardcore life skills either. So, making sure that both audiences are cared for is kind of our job. And then just for either side of that spectrum, making sure that they have clear, concise intro information that helps them understand the basics, and then you give them where to look next. That's kind of the whole goal of the academy, and I think it serves both parties quite well.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I think you meant, Tiger, a little bit at first, but definitely hey, there's more to it. And then Ashyi, you put in a lot of resources that people can go to that will amplify their learning if they want to. Right, there's different sections to each path.
Yeah, and a lot of the resources were through the community team, who are lovely, because I don't know a lot of the streamers out there, so that was great. But I think what's really great about going through the academy is when you find a section that you like, you might read maybe a paragraph or two on abyssal sites, and you think, oh, that's really cool. You'll watch a video maybe when that's out, and you want to learn more, and you just scroll to the bottom, and there'll be links to streamers for abyssals. There'll be YouTube videos on abyssal sites, guides on abyssal sites, and the same thing applies to anything. And you say you want to do invention, or you want to learn more about wormholes, and I think it's fantastic. And Eve Academy really, I would say, augments the community resources that are out there, and working together, it's a really, really solid way for new players to jump into New Eden.
Yeah, despite their level. Have you guys thought about certifications? Would CCP have any role in that, or is that something that players would have to make on their own to say hey, this is a trained pilot? They're hireable.
I think that's an awesome idea. I vaguely remember this coming up in discussions. We didn't want to hold back, getting good information out to people was our first priority, which is why this is released now and in beta. Even though we don't have all the videos ready just yet, they are coming and will continue to come. That would be a super cool idea. I think it would probably require to be particularly a good integration. It would probably require some sort of in-client integration first.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Is that something you can weigh into, though, to be able to make that decision on what is trained and what's not trained for players? I've always wondered about that relationship between what CCP can do and say, here's the world, and the players saying, here's the meaning of the world. I've always found that I want CCP to weigh in and say, here's an official training guide, and here's a stamp that says that you've done it, therefore you're qualified. And but at the same time, I wonder if CCP is well, we can't really make judgments like that on what qualified means. But this is that gray area where, yeah, this person knows what tracking is. They did a tracking tutorial and they know what it is. So,
well, yeah, I mean, I guess we would have to do tests then, maybe, yeah. Or it's a complicated subject, because just anyone can kind of click on Udemy and go through some courses and say they have done a course, but they might not have learned anything. So, right. Giving out a certification puts a certain amount of responsibility on the person or the entity giving out the certification, that the person knows actually what they're doing. Did they pass the course? You know what I mean? So,
Mike, do you have any certifications from EveUni? Do you graduate people?
If you are engaged enough in EveUni, you can graduate from freshman to sophomore, and then you even get the graduate medal at a certain point when you engage enough content and prove a certain knowledge of at least an aspect of your game.
Okay.
And have been in the past actually corporations that gave preferential recruitment to graduates of EveUni.
Oh, well, that's
I know that from when we would get applicants who came from EveUni to Brave, we were always super happy to take them on board. So,
well,
it was definitely a good mark on their record.
Yeah, it was a plus, right? And I kind of feel like if CCP were to give a plus, like that would be for any corporate CEO would be like, oh, look, they're certified that they've done these classes or tested or quizzed through the stuff. In fact, it might be
it's a cool idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think, right, it also might help in other ways too. Like somebody comes into the game acting like they don't know anything or whatever. And, well, never mind. I was going to get into detecting spies and all that extra gameplay that's in there. Like to put more man hours in front of spies, I think would be a good thing because that's what a CEO
I think that's
about.
actually why some corporations try fairly hard to, or they try to request that a player, for those corporations that recruit new players, they try to make sure that those new players have completed the SOE arc at least.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of a stand-in for that. Or at least have some clear activity. So a lot of these corporations, and I was a recruiter for Brave, so I was one of the people that was reviewing this for people, is you look at someone and it's like, have they done more than 10 minutes in a tutorial is what you're looking for.
Right.
And so that was kind of your super base level. Did the spy put in enough effort? Check.
Yeah, exactly. Like put some obstacles in front of them. You're going to spy, you're going to spend some time cultivating a spy character. It's not just an instant, burn and create a new one.
Yeah, geez, you have to work for it first.
Yeah, spend some hours doing it. Yeah, build some history. And it's an ecosystem because CEOs are looking for reliable people that aren't going to destroy their corporation. And, to be able to trust the membership that you have can build relationships faster and so on and so forth. But what can I say? It's a complicated game, but I like the idea of CCP kind of putting in some really nice education, like you guys have with the academy for players to get in there and get involved, and so forth. Okay, just one last question here, and that is since we were talking about new players, I did want to throw this question out to see what you guys thought. But how does a new player, let's say people who are watching this are new players and are kind of interested in joining corporations, how can they actually groom themselves to be, I don't know, asked to join a corporation?
Well, as we just discussed, they need to have some base level of activity for most groups, except Pandemic Horde, who will take literally anyone, and they're a ton of fun. So, I mean, by all means, people can join that. They need to be able to take on goals at the very least, and go out and do things. And they need to be active and engaged and interested in learning and engaging with the world. So there's a lot of new players who apply to a corporation. So this is something that you'll see relatively often, where a new player they'll finish the tutorial and they'll be like, maybe they've done a career agent, and then they're just kind of sitting in a station for a couple hours feeling bored, and then they apply to a corporation, which is not the best look when you're trying to find a group to fly with, because that is a person that's clearly already difficult to engage. And so players who are, if they're trying to look good for a corporation, they need to effectively have their own life. It's almost like Space Tinder, where it's like
that's better than I call it Space Grinder all the time by mistake, but I meant Tinder. But go ahead.
Yeah, either one works.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. I mean, you need to look like a full and interesting person for a lot of these groups to want you, because they want someone interesting and engaged and willing to learn and all of that who to join them. So
that's great dating advice too for EVE Online players.
life advice from CCP
good life
Aurora.
advice. I think that works. All right.
If
So
I
You
could
have
just
to bring something to the table, I think. I think that's the general idea.
Yeah, but at the same time, this is a common misconception, or it's a common difficulty, I suppose. A lot of new players will want to help to an extreme degree, and a lot of new player corporations don't necessarily always have a great way for that person to help right away.
yeah.
So sometimes there are things, but it's something that's like, well, go grind ADMs, which some people are happy to do, but that's kind of a tricky thing. So the best way that a new player can help their new corporation is to become engaged with the game, want to continue playing regularly, and continue to grow into, a pilot that can do a whole lot of things. Like that is exactly what almost every corporation out there wants for their new player recruits, which is kind of a tricky paradigm, because some players will join a corporation, they're like, I want to help. You're like, okay, help yourself. and
You'll help yourself.
They're kind of like, yeah, it's an awkward thing almost for these new players, because they're, these are the helper type people that do this, and then they're like, wait, so it can almost feel like there's a little bit of like, do you not need my help, or am I not useful yet? It's kind of a tricky thing to deal with for the corporation. So for anyone in a corporation out there who can find a way to somehow fuse getting that player interested and helping themselves with telling them that they're helping the corporation, that is ideal. Group mining ops, or like group low-level ratting or whatever, is a good way to kind of sneak it in, where you're actually helping them, but you tell them they're helping you. A good start.
Oh, I like that. Ashie, what's your experience with this? What would you recommend?
Yeah. So for me, it's all about the human contact, really, above pretty much anything else. And I don't take on that many brand new players to Foxholders. We've got slightly higher skill requirements these days. But still, the people that I do bring in, including the slightly lower SP players, I don't have a formal interview with them where I say, oh, do you have this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do that? What do you want to do? I ask them, hey, what are you all about? Who are you?
What kind of person are you?
Yeah, and when you have a job interview or something, and they say, oh, it's just going to be just an informal little chat. And it really is like that for me, where I just want an informal chat with people, and I want to find people who are social and who want to be engaged with me and my group, and who I could say that I'm friends with at some point later down the line. And I think Eve really has that whole friendship machine effect, and it does work.
I get the chance to build a recruitment application form again, I definitely want to add the first question to be what's your best Eve pickup line? I think that's a good metric.
I think we're on the same wavelength. Go ahead, Mike.
I was about to say, if she wants to have that question, she should answer it first.
Okay. All right. Hold on. What is my best one? Because I have a couple. Phoebe, are you a DED site? Because you are a 10 out of 10.
Oh my god.
That's one down.
I'm gonna have to think about. Wild. All right. So, Tiger, where can people find this resource?
Well, it's easily accessible from our main page. It has, if you just go to EveOnline.com, there's in the top nav, there's a beginner guide, it says. But it's also just EveOnline.com/EveAcademy. Or Eve-Academy, I think it is.
Right. Is there a way to it from inside the client, or do they need to go out and find it?
Now, currently, I think it's still running. We put it in the sort of in-game news window, and that would lead you outside of the client. Once that, we can't have that all the time. So I don't know how we're gonna kind of plug that into the game. That's definitely one of the things that's on the drawing board. but it's it's in the launcher as well. There's a launcher banner that links to it, so it should be quite easily accessible. We will be adding the tutorial videos into the game as well.
Into the agency window, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And we already have the suggested academy fittings in the community fittings window. So we're kind of trying to connect the dots and actively kind of working on figuring out the best way to connect that path.
Yeah, looks like through different areas, not just one.
Yeah,
which makes sense because this website seems like it's a collection of a lot of different parts of the game that are coming out to the internet. So we can do it, and it looks very mobile friendly, which is kind of nice because people are on the run a lot. So that works out too. Okay, last question.
And for people with a single screen, they can pull it up on their phone while they're still playing.
Yeah, totally, right? Like the sidekick type thing. Yeah. Last question for you guys, and you don't have to answer it, but I'm curious about this because it comes up all the time. Ganking players in high sec, good for the game, bad for the game. Like people, do they stick around? Are they retained after getting blown up, or do they say, this sucks, I quit? Do you guys have any evidence on it?
There was an interesting study done, which I'm sure that you've heard mentioned before by CCP, which was where they studied the retention of people who suffered their first loss versus those who didn't. And the data seemed to point towards that sudden initial hardship actually galvanizing those players and increasing their retention. There's a lot of difficult things that are maybe unanswered by the initial study, like what is the aura effect of the psychological aura effect of the existence of ganking, which is a really difficult question to answer. And it's not one that I'm going to claim to have answers for. But people are very torn on this particular issue. It is obviously, you can't go into new player systems and gank them, including, I think, the systems for the Sisters of Eve arc and so there's some limits on it.
Allowed at all? Like you can't do that?
Yeah, if you go into the rules, there's effectively a rule that's like there's no new player griefing. So it's not, we don't want people to just go make people's lives a pain before they understand the basics of the game. But shortly thereafter, it's kind of a thing that happens. But that said, whether the impact is net positive or net negative, I'm not going to pretend to know.
I think it's also, there's no one size fits all. So it really depends on the person. Like for one person, it would, galvanize them and be like, I'm going to beat this. And for another person, it would just be like, I'm gone. So it's, there's no magic solution here.
Yeah. I don't want to be the itsy bitsy spider that gets up the well and then gets washed down to do it all over again kind of thing.
Yeah, it's actually something though that we use for the Magic Moments program. It's one of the factors that's looked at for the GMs, which can, for those players that would take it as a negative thing where it might push them out, they get flagged. They get a flag on their account that this is like Magic Moment eligible, and the GMs can pick those up when they're able. And so a GM will suddenly like message this person and be like, hey, we saw you just lost your first ship. Like, do you know why you died? Here's some free stuff to get you going again. And so it can actually take it and make it a very positive interaction. One of the most difficult things about ganking is that players don't understand why they died and what they could have done better, which kind of leads to can lead to a feeling of frustration because, like, how do I prevent that again? I just lost effort that I put into getting the ship. And so having the GMs message them to talk and be like, hey, so this was the situation. This is why and how things happened. Here's some stuff, get you back on your feet again. Here's a new venture. That can be very beneficial. And we know for a fact that the people who are contacted by the Magic Moments programs with the GMs have just massively improved retention rates.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That program does amazing things. Good. And every so often, if you read Reddit or something like that, you'll see all these posts where it's like, for somebody who was contacted, like, it was so cool, GMs reached out to me, like I was feeling really frustrated with this thing, but then suddenly, like, fantastic program. I love it so much.
Yeah. Well, I think it was teased by some of the advanced players saying like, oh, look, CCP is doing grief counseling. But I love the fact that you got some results out of it and saying, hey, we're ahead of the game. We're not, we innovate retention. We don't try to do what everybody else is doing to keep people around.
Yeah, it's a super cool program. Unfortunately, it's also manpower restricted, so we can't hit everyone. But if we, get the chance to expand it anymore, like, that's by all means.
All right. Well, it's been a nice talk with you, Aurora. By the way, I thought when you said the aura effect, I thought, is that the Aurora effect or aura? I was like, is there an Aurora effect? There is an aura effect, by the way, because what got me to stick around for the first 10 days was listening to Aura talk to me while I was going through some things. And I thought, oh, cool, I get a partner AI to hang out.
Yeah, and that is just going to improve a little bit. So there's cool things coming down the pipe for the Aura companionship. So. Yeah. Well, Tigershark, do you have anything else that you wanted to make sure gets out there for the players?
Yeah, I mean, we want the community to use this webpage to help new players, but we also want their help in improving it. So, there's a forum post that you can put comments on, create resources. I mean, the page is localized in quite a few languages, and we would love to have career path specific resources in every single language. So yeah, we're just looking to the community to help make this even better. Yeah, it is just as a note to anyone who's immediately jumping out to start making resources. It is super highly curated, and so we do have to be selective about the ones that we put on the page. So we apologize if we can't fit yours in there. But as always, even if it doesn't make the page, it still helps new players. So if you look at YouTube for even like the most general new player guides, all those videos have thousands of views because it's something there's a lot of hunger for. Whether or not it winds up on the Academy page.
Great. Well, Mike, Ashley, Tigershark, CCP Tigershark, and CCP Aurora, thank you very much for this hour for new players and some of the stuff that you've put into the Academy. A really great new way of looking at career paths and knowing what to do next for new players and also people who are transitioning to a different career inside of EVE Online. Highly recommended. And please give feedback. And I love that it's highly curated so that it will be maintained in a good way. So it's great. It's a great answer to a long time question. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it. Welcome back to the live part of today's show on Talking in Stations. Remind you that we just saw CCP Aurora and CCP Tigershark, along with Ashley from Ashyin.space and Mike from EveUni. And they were talking about the really cool website that CCP has put together for new players and for players who are interested in following a career path. So check that out. The Academy is what it's called. And joining me now is Arcia, Sutonia, and Caleb. We're back to talk about this week's news. Okay, let's talk about Monday. We had on Talking in Stations, if you haven't seen this video, very popular. And that is ProGod versus Matani, What Leaders Are Saying. And this is the series where I break down the messaging coming out of the Imperium and coming out of Legacy, sometimes Pappy. There'll be other groups in there, but it's basically the two warring parties in Delve and how they're speaking to their guys and beyond, what they're trying to say, what kind of message they're trying to get out.
Definitely our heavy hitter this week, right?
Yeah, kind of a light week on news, right?
Yeah, the numbers-wise, it's almost double all the other products that we put out. So it was very popular. And it's also quite interesting and slightly controversial. But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot.
Good. Okay, and then on Tuesday, we did a wake up, our Vendetta is tackled. And that one, we actually talked about some of the bridges that were put in, and we talked about other stuff on these shows, but that one had such a great story at the end by Shen, who is part of TIS. He's actually from Army of Mangoes, a young man, new player, smart guy, and he told the story of what it was like when a Titan was tackled in Esoteria. And not only was a Titan tackled, but then a Vendetta got tackled too. And so they had to scramble in the middle of their night, basically, to save these ships. And they did. And it was a really exciting story. And I asked him, were people freaking out? And he said, no. Everybody was professional and quiet until finally they knew that everything was safe. And then everybody melted down into a huge amount of emotion and couldn't go back to sleep. So that was a good little story. Also, we had Hateless was on that show too, which was really nice to hear his perspective on some of the events that are going on. So that was Tuesdays, called Wake Up, Vendetta Tackle. Then on Wednesday, we did What It's Like to Lose a Titan. And this show kind of came together around Lieutenant Condor from Dreadbomb. And he was involved in a very risky raid that was super exciting. We actually caught it live. And it was a trap. They were attacking the Amamaki Keep star, Dreadbomb was, or actually Wrecking Crew. And they were trapped by Nulsekia Shulpin and the inhabitants of Amamaki, including, what is it? Snuff. Gosh, I forgot their name. And they paid a price for it. I think they lost a few Titans. His was one of them. And we had him on the show right after that battle happened. This was about a month ago. And it was a very emotional experience. So we wanted to revisit with him now that he had some distance on it and he had recovered by being given an SRP Titan back and he was rebuilding it, the fit. And to see what it's like to emotionally to lose such an investment. And the reason I thought of this was because Carneros described many times to me and the audience what it's like to lose a Titan. And it's a very emotional experience. It's a very bonding experience because there's a lot going into that ship, maybe unlike a frigate or other things. And I was fascinated with how Carnero said that he felt closer to that ship, that the experience of losing it actually almost embedded it in him. So I thought that was interesting. And Condor says that that's what happened to him too. Go ahead, Arcia.
I'm a firm believer that a ship doesn't actually exist until it explodes.
Right, and because then you have a kill mail
philosophy right there.
Yeah. Right, and then you have the whole story of that ship and what it has done, or what it failed to do.
Yeah,
the majority of losses of Titans, though, are usually group losses, right? It's
Yeah, exactly.
very frequently that they're SRP'd. So it's not a personal loss. It's more like I failed my people and that kind of emotion, I think.
I think it's a big difference dying in a big battle where other people are dying. There's almost a group therapy that goes with that. But I think if you die in isolation or in a small group, it's a different thing altogether.
Yeah, because then it's like you got caught, right?
That depends on what you died in a small group. Like if you're just roaming around in T1 cruises and you're like, do you want to go deep on that Macarial? It's like you die, you're not like upset. But like if you're just kind of solo moving a cap or a jump freighter or something, and you do something less than smart and you die doing something stupid that you didn't choose to do. There's a difference between doing something stupid that you choose to do because it's hilarious and doing something stupid that you didn't choose to do.
Maybe it's that dying with the purpose of the ship rather than incidentally dying.
It's the difference between losing it in the M2 bloodbath, which I think is honorable, and being hot dropped by Rocket X and his friends, right?
Well, that would have been frustrating because that was such a technical disaster that would be no way to accept you lost the Titan because you didn't get to participate at all in it except to hit jump when you were supposed to go in. But I think if you're in a big, let's say M2, the armor timer, where there's an actual slugfest, if you died in that, I think that's very satisfying. You did what you're supposed to do. You died with purpose. And a lot of people did. So there's kind of no shame in it, or so it doesn't feel like a loss. It feels like an expense. But I think I think Carneros died bridging people after the Fountain War. He was helping clear some people out and stuff. And in this case, it was an ambush that went wrong. It was a baited ambush and they got caught. And by following orders, Lieutenant Condor didn't jump out early, and that would have saved him. But he was following orders and he didn't jump out early. And yeah, he felt that loss pretty good. But check that out. It's a pretty good episode on Thursday. And then that was on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we talked about investing with, again, Shen and I looked at faction battleships. Actually, Suetonia, you were the one that kind of told us faction battleships are going to go up to $1 billion. Do you still feel that way? What do you think's going on with faction?
I mean, if you take a look at the prices of like nightmares and things, they're now like 1.2 bill or higher. So they've like almost doubled from what they were. If you look at the build cost alone, right, I think faction battleships are probably going to be around the like 700 to 1 billion-ish range. And like pirate battleships will be like over 1 bill, I think, eventually, right?
Well, right now they're ridiculously expensive because gas is still rare. It hasn't made it to the market in the supply that it needs. So the build cost is way out of whack. The bottlenecks are real tight around the stuff that's produced by those gases. So I think it's almost like two something billion for a faction battleship to build, not to sell, but to build.
Well,
and that's not even counting the BPC cost as well.
Right.
And in your defense, Matterall, you were actually getting in on this type of stuff before the industry changes, but I still feel like you're trying to talk up the market in an Elon Musk kind of way.
Yeah. So, Tony, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, like, right now, like some of the ships that had like huge supplies, like the rattlesnake specifically, especially that because it was obviously a very popular PvE ship. Some of the ships like the Balgun, for example, where it didn't really have too much use, so there was a lot of them around. So the Balgun was already kind of cheap for a pirate faction battleship. I think it was always cheaper than like Apoc Navy or something. So they only really it is an essential ship for like certain PvP roles. Like you see them a lot dropped with faxes or used by like low sec or wormholers or groups like Volta or at that kind of scale. They use quite a lot. But since they still cost $2 billion to build, eventually they're going to go up in price. So although it might take a while for that to go up because I'm not sure what the existing supply was like.
Yeah, I think the smart thinking is that and it's just hard to tell right now because it gets complicated. There's a lot of pulls on the supplies that actually make the things that you're trying to buy. Therefore, it's no longer a competition for the ingredients that go into one item, because those ingredients are used in all kinds of other things. It's almost like sugar all of a sudden is used by, not only pastries, but now ketchup and that sort of stuff. So the demand on sugar is going to pastries. It's also going to all these other things that are new. So the price of sugar is going to go up, which is going to push the price of pastries even higher, because it's harder to get a hold of. And that's what's happening with PI. I think
it's a complicated hype cycle, right? Because it's not like when trick ships and stuff like that came out, where it was a small amount of things that were influenced, and then you had a more normal hype cycle where, like, what was it, 6 ships or something like that in total that were using these new components. So the supply of these new components were kind of catching up easily with the demand for the ship types that they went into. This is a little bit more complicated because it's everything in the game pretty much that's been touched, right? So stockpiling the new components and all that thing that relates to gas and reactions, that whole economy needs to catch up before prices will even start to normalize. So you got a little bit of a chaos everywhere, because industrialists have also kind of yanked all their production, and when they do that, you have almost an artificial scarcity. So you get a bump on pricing just from the fact that people are not actually even committing to making anything, because they want to wait for a more certain profitability range.
We saw production on the monthly economic report drop tremendously. Go ahead, Stony.
Yeah, and the another thing too, right, is the mineral price index also jumped up a ton again this month as well with the industry changes, because I think a lot of industrialists, whatever they didn't reach build, they're now sitting on those minerals waiting for prices to come down, because obviously it doesn't make sense to build stuff. Not a whole lot of people are selling minerals right now because they want to hang on to them. So even though technically everything battle cruiser and below is much easier to build in terms of the minerals, not a lot of people are actually building them. So the prices actually haven't come down, because people want to hold on to what they have right now until CCP either changes something else, or these sort of supply chains get figured out and prices normalize.
Yeah.
Meryl, I need a 5-minute mute because Sutonia said mineral index.
There's going to be months of strange pricing going on, so we'll see that. But you can see on Thursday we talked about big investing, long-term investing, and how that's different than day trading or trying to play the market. It's not for everybody. It takes a longer time to make your profit, and bad bets can really mess you up. But I tell some stories there about all kinds of different investments in the past that I made. And I know it's self-indulgent to talk about my own story and my own stuff, but they were good examples of what it's like to invest in a sector and then sit and wait for a year or more before you decide to start selling what you picked up before.
And funny fact, Meryl, I actually think that you're a really decent or almost good investor. You just have one problem. You do the same thing that some day traders do. You sit there and stare at the market movements and the news, and then you panic prematurely, so you actually lose out on a lot of profit. But you're really, really good at picking good things. I think it's both the fact that you have an inherent feeling of where the game is supposed to be going, so you get in on things very early. And I don't know if you have other hot tips dudes like myself, but you seem to be right at least 3 out of 4 times.
My problem is I sometimes hold on to things too long and never cash in. Or
you cash in just too fast because you panic.
Yeah, there are sometimes, but you need to get liquid sometimes. Anyway, check out that one. That's on Thursday. Big Investing by Surfing Trends. Then Friday, we did a review of the gate building and how that's going. A lot of you know there's an event going on right now. It's actually been extended by 2 days. There's a little bit of trouble introducing it with people getting into it, introducing the event. So they've extended it by a couple days. Don't know if that's why, but in any case, you can still participate. And nobody was building the stain gate.
Yeah, that was pretty funny, especially because Stain Guy, like a notorious Reddit poster, is someone who's begged CCP to put a LoSec gate to Stain for so long, and he hasn't even been mining himself.
Yeah. There was somebody who wrote in our YouTube comments, I am the boss of Stain. And so he said, we're waiting for those LoSecers to come into Stain so that they can be taken care of by the locals. So that's going to be interesting.
I mean, it could be a good opportunity, though, right? Like, if no one's done anything yet, you only have to like run a few sites, and ventures and
get your name on there
are pretty cheap, right? Yeah, you can get your name like forever put on a monument in Eve.
But seriously, Suetonia, Stain Guy is retired, right? He's basically sitting on a beach going, my job here is done.
I just wonder if like the gate will make Stain a little more popping, because normally you roam around Stain and it's dead until you get killed by good sacks, right? And
the locals.
Yeah. So I wonder if it'll be a little more popping overall.
I'm really excited for it, not because of Stain, but because that constellation is actually really close to period basis. It like changes like getting from Empire to period basis from something like 40 jumps to like 20 or something.
Wow.
And that's actually pretty interesting, and that might mean that, you know, the guys who are in period basis right now, you might see a lot more roamers down there, and as a consequence of that, because of like where it connects and where Paragon Soul and Esoteria are, it's going to be a lot easier to roam to Paragon Soul and Esoteria now after as well.
Wow, that's bad news for period basis from people like you.
Well, I mean, it depends on your perspective, right? Like the good news is that if there's more PvP there and better Empire access, that can actually be a good thing for you, especially with the current meta, where you know, you need a high DBS to make good crab ticks. Like it's not as much about like hiding in like dead end regions anymore, right? The outer regions, and trying to Rookle mine or like crab in perfect safety.
Yeah.
Like the meta is kind of like Fraternity have called on to, right? Is you actually move close to LoSec, so you have access to the LoSec minerals, like easier freight back to Empire, so you can import export cheaper, and then you also have like the better access to PvP, and to some extent, right, like having PvP in your space is good because it raises the bounty risk modifier, so you probably make more money overall, even though your guys are probably going to be dying a bit more too.
Yeah, you're basically putting nutrients in the soil from the blood of the people who are fighting in your lands, and that way you have better harvesting possibilities. One second, that's just such a good point. I want to emphasize that the period basis now has throughput to LoSec, brings it alive. Stain is an ugly pipe bottleneck kind of place, but that's really great for people to be able to move back and forth like that. Arcia?
I feel like the explanation for why PvP increases the bounty modifier is because pirates, like the NPC pirates, behave just like the players, where they look for activity on the map and go towards it to shoot something. Right? That's my headcanon for like why in world this is working like that.
Is that canon, or is that what you were thinking?
No, it's just headcanon, right?
Oh,
there's been no like thorough explanation as to why Concord implemented this. Right.
Headcanon. Funny. Suetonia, do you have anything else?
Oh no, I was just gonna say that maybe the pirates are just really good at ninja salvaging and, you know, taking the loot that people leave behind.
But again, I think the applicable part of that is the period basis is connected to Stain, is connected to LoSec. That brings period basis back into something I think you said that was critical, Suetonia, which is the new meta isn't security by obscurity. It isn't hiding away as far away from people and harvesting the resources. That's not the meta for empire building anymore. It's getting involved, getting close to those shores that are active, the LoSec shores, basically, and basically active money making. So I think that's really good.
Yeah,
point.
And with the new materials like gas and wormhole stuff, right? You want to lower your importing costs as much as possible, since people need to import stuff a lot more now into the LoSec.
Yeah, good observation. Okay, so that's the week. Check those shows out. Also around EVE Online, there was mostly not a lot of news coming out of the game itself. There's some battles here and there. We'll talk about those another time, but a lot of stuff in the meta. We had CSM interviews on the CCP channel for Twitch, and you got to see, was it 5 minutes?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Each person. You were both on there since you're both running for CSM, Suetonia and Arcia. What was it like?
That was fine. It was just a pretty standard interview. No real hard questions. You know, you don't get the convict Matterall experience from CCP, at least.
No shipping by Swift or Carneros.
Pretty much agree with that. It was straightforward. I said who I was, and then everybody got asked the same basic questions.
And what was the idea of Arcia? You put your camera on like you did today, and Suetonia, you put a picture up. You didn't put a camera up.
Yeah, that's because I just woke up, so I was like, yeah, I'll just put a picture there.
Still, the funniest was Brisk in the pool with the suit. That legitimately made me laugh. Like,
was it a hot tub or a pool or?
It was a pool. Like it was like a kiddie pool.
Yeah.
I laughed at that. I definitely
the inflatable banana and the like spinning wheel as well. Like it's pretty good.
A lot of effort. I think he put a suit in jeopardy again. I think that's the second time.
Well, I think he said that the suit was already messed up anyway, because he said that the crotch was like already broken or something.
Yeah, I think he keeps that one ready for these sorts of gags. What did you think, Caleb?
Oh, I was enjoying it. I of course I knew that Brisk was going to do this because it's been hinted at for quite a while that he was promising that he was going to do the hot tub meta, and there was even a teaser with just the banana floating and things like that on one of the meta shows. So that one was not surprising, but I really enjoyed Spod's interview, and I actually also liked the funny one with what's his name, Angry Moustache, when he was actually doing a PowerPoint presentation. It might have been cringe to some people, but I think it was actually kind of cool because he was going into detail and trying to do it inside the clock. It's like, okay, you're not going to make it, mate, because 10 minutes is not enough for all that stuff. But I think he almost made it, so that was fun. And there was some good appearances. I kind of enjoyed Teddy's appearance as well. And I know that now I'm mentioning all the TIS people. That was because there's so many minutes of stuff this week that I had to prioritize. So I was kind of clicking past many of the other interviews. Sorry about that. I'll catch them and get around to it eventually.
Well, yeah, speaking of like a week loaded for meta content, which are shows and stuff like that, there was a Push to Talk episode. You're part of Push to Talk. You're there all the time as crew and as a panelist and stuff. What was different about this week's Push to Talk?
Well, the difference this time was that we finally got one of this infamous INN writers and local smack talkers, Moomin Amatin, on. It's been a while since we've actually had him on anything on INN. I think at least more than a year, maybe even 2. So it was nice to see him come back. He's one of those really, really old EVE players, grumpy veterans that writes these tongue-in-cheek, almost sarcasm dribbling pieces on INN. It's usually slightly propaganda-esque, and then it's history stuff. So it's like if Andrew Groen had a Spin Master 2000. And then, of course, personally, I love his British accent and his old man tone of voice. So we had a lot of back and forth. Again, it's a good substitute when we no longer have the other old man that left us and is now doing the CCP interviews with the CSM candidates. So we miss you, Elise. Please come back.
What, old man star Elise? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, old man Elise.
But
did you see some of his tweets? I feel old. Yeah, that's because you are old, mate.
So rude. Well, I thought the Push to Talk episode was really compelling this week, with a few exceptions when it went a little overboard on, this hand-wringing kind of stuff.
That's a feature, not a bug.
Well, okay. But it's off-putting to people who were enjoying the first part of it, which I thought was really great, with you talking about finance and Moomin talking about really floating ideas about war. That was a really good episode.
It's something that I've been meaning to talk about for a while, but because it was so drama and controversy filled, I kind of left it out of the whole explanation of the economic realities, because we covered this 6 months or longer, right? Back in the early days of the war, when we had really on a lot, we did a lot of back and forth with talking about economy and war stashes and all that stuff. But because of all the drama, I kind of put it on the shelf for the past 3 months or so at least. But I thought it was worth mentioning because Pickles actually brought it up when he called the war bonds a Ponzi. And of course, I dunked on him a little bit on that one. And, well, still love you, Pickles.
Pro God. We call him Pro God here because we respect what people want to be called. Your staff, so you can't get away with the guest. I can call him whatever I want. Okay. The next thing was Open Comms, the return of Dirk McGurk, at least for that one episode. We don't know if he'll stick around, but it was a DJ memorial, which was kind of a big deal. DJ was the founder of Open Comms, and he passed away a couple of years ago. And so it was his birthday, and they celebrated with DJ's wife, which was really nice. So check that out. That was a nice episode too. And that's what was going on in some of the shows this week. The next portion is player news, and that was probably the biggest thing that happened was Pochven just got really active with a lot of combat. Arcia is part of Edencom, and she was in there fighting it out. What happened?
Oh, last night there was a hull timer and an Asbel in the system of Shoda, and the defending forces were successfully able to defend it from us. It was probably, I think it was bigger than the last big fight in Shoda, numbers wise. We went in once again with a Typhoon fleet. We got landed on by the much larger Megathon fleet almost as soon as we landed, and we weren't really able to get away. We took fairly sizable losses and warped out. We had some other fleets that on grid of other organizations who were roughly coordinating with us, not in the same fleet or anything, but they were skirmishing with Cerberuses. They killed a few things, but ultimately the Asbel was saved by the defending forces. Yesterday or the day before, there was like an attack on one of our citadels that ended up, the armor timer fleet that showed up to attack was actually like a meme fleet with Tristans, which was very different from any of the other fights in the campaign. Kind of funny, and I think both sides had fun with that one. But besides that one Tristan fleet, most of the fighting has been battleship slugfests. Some of them, the defending Pochven forces win handily, and some of them we win handily. There's usually a lot of ships destroyed in every fight. And I think it's overall been a blast. And I hope a lot of the people on the other side think the same.
Yeah, and this isn't, it's what's happened, what's changed that these fights are now happening, and hasn't it been like all week, and will it go on, you think?
Well, okay. The start of the war was Strebog attacked an Electus Matari citadel in Skarkon to try to put pressure on Electus Matari to stop putting pressure on a high-sec pirate group that we had declared war on. And we decided, all right, we'll come in here and fight Strebog because the gates are open now. And they were also on our short list because they're Triglavian aligned. And we are Republic aligned. As the fights escalated, we first brought in the other forces of, like the other RP groups, the Phoenix Naval Systems and Lumen, who were on the Edencom side with us in the invasions. And as the fights were happening, more and more outside groups like Nullsec, Initial Pen, Dread Bomb are involved in some of the fights. They saw these fights and they wanted to get involved. We're still forming our fleet with just like the Edencom groups and our own blues, but like there's a few different groups who are like, are you going to this timer tonight? Are you going this time? Okay, and we all show up. And it just, if you ever saw that scene from Anchorman where the fight scene where they're like walking along and then like the other group comes and then all these other groups just keep pouring out of the sides. That's basically what Pochven is like right now.
My wife worked on that movie, Anchorman. I went to the crew party for that movie. And I have a picture of, who's the guy that became a big star of The Office? Forget his name. Anyway, I won't get into it. But yeah, the Anchorman where they show up at the corner and they start to pull out their knives and pitchforks and all that stuff. And the news groups are, and there are multiple groups fighting each other. That's pretty cool. Well, we'll see how that forms up in the future there with Edencom now able to get in there and move around. Yeah, Steve Carell. Thank you. Yeah. I can't finish that story. I realized what I was going to say isn't appropriate for the air. Okay, so thanks for the Pochven report. We'll be looking at that as it seems like there's some kind of legitimate war going in there that you guys are involved with in your own merits. But there's also talk of, from Nullsec, a proxy war. Is that a bunch of hot air? What do you think?
Well, it's maybe not the right term, right? This is more about the situation with the siege in Delve. Means that a lot of people are doing other stuff elsewhere. You can see this on the uptick of wormhole ISK making and high-sec mining and Pochven participation. And I do suspect that you're going to see more of what I'm calling a happy attempt of denial of play, where they're trying to cramp down and stop the Imperium from being able to have ad hoc fun elsewhere.
So this started as one RP group. Actually, it started as the Triangles attacking us, right? After we were an unrelated group. And we went back to fight the people we fought during the invasions. Now other groups are pouring into the fight, and they each have their own motivations that are completely different from ours. And maybe some of them are like something, the Null War. But like, it seems like, it feels from my perspective that everybody yelling about proxy war is trying to take this fight that came out of RP and turn it into their Null stuff and claim it for theirs. When I feel like it's a fire that we started. Well, the RP peers started, the two RP groups started, and like every campaign of my entire EVE career almost has been small groups working together against a larger one. And as fights heat up, groups come into fights because they see these fights on Zkill. They see the battle reports linked and they think, I want a piece of that. And whatever their motivations may be, it didn't start because of anything to do with the Null War.
Well, Suetonia, again, I go back to what you said. I think it's a really good point, and that is that the new meta is to evolve into active gameplay, into the areas that are low sec related, whatever active money making can happen. And that includes Pochven, I think. So I wonder if there's already bets being made on how involved to get with it.
Well, Pochven doesn't actually have any unique resources, right? For the most part, I mean, you have the Triglavian ore, but it just gives you regular minerals. There's no like new gas side to. You do get the Triglavian Tech 2 salvage from there, right?
Tech 2 salvage, right?
But I'm not sure like how how many nullsec doctrines use any of the tech to trigger avian ships. So you don't really see Zard ads and
their market, by the way,
used too much.
Yeah, I think on Thursday when we talked about market stuff, we looked at T2 loot from Pochven and how much it has dropped. It's like 50% of what it was. It may go back up.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. Well, I mean, it's a lot easier to get in there now, right? With no standings and gates, it's a lot easier to be a ninja salvager because unlike before, you're not restricted to being in one system. You can just go from system to system looking for wrecks that the NPCs have left behind and ninja salvage it. It's also a lot easier to run the sites now as a group too, because you don't necessarily need the standings to go in there. A lot of the value from the sites comes from the ISK value generated from the staging observatory sites, whatever they're called.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Observatory flashpoints. Those are the main source of ISK. Then there's also the world arcs, which are very, very, very lucrative, but you need a really decent group, and there's a lot of hunters in Pochven now.
Right. We'll break you up while you try to do those. Well, and so what you're saying is because those are very specialized pieces of loot, they don't have a wider market, so they may not be what you're supposed to do for for income.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm not sure people are nullsecers are going in there strategically. If that's what you think, but I think there's just content in there, right? It's a good source of making money. I know there's a good subsection of Goonswarm that works with the Triglavian groups who have been going in there to get money, and it's probably just a good source of getting fights as well. And it's also a good travel conduit as well around certain areas of the map. So,
yeah, the leader of Strybog denies that they are working with the Imperium on anything, but they are +5. I don't know how that needle's threaded, but he says they're not. It's
that's historical reasons, right? It ties all the way back to the Neargist events and all that, right? As far as I know,
when the Imperium helped in Neargia.
Yeah, this is what. Okay, right now there is a denial of access to proper game and content in the war, right? So if you want to do something, you can have some fun on alts and doing other things. I'm almost inclined to say this is the Imperium's F3 button, right? If you need to do something, then you can go and have some fun in all that Triglavian stuff. And there's a lot of Imperium people that actually really like that, also from a lore perspective and content perspective. But it's also really good ISK, right? You need to be a little bit specialized and know what you're doing, as far as I'm told. But I'd say that it's number 2 or number 3 on the list of what you can do as a backup income. Of course, Wormhole. What's it called? Hobo farming or roach farming is definitely still number 1, I'd say. But then there's, of course, as I said, high-sec mining, and even some of the Imperium people have claimed that they have crabbing alts in the actual enemy lines.
Well, it wasn't lost on me that we reported that structure was owned by Goonswarm, the Satio, not a Satio, but there's a structure in one of those areas, and then we got corrected.
It was just manned, right? It was manned by a good.
Yeah, it was. Sorry, yeah, and it was gunned by
Tatara. That was gunned by somebody.
Yeah, we cleared that up, but then a little bit later, ProGod. So then it was on our mind, and then ProGod gets asked, like, "Are we going into Pochven to fight Goonswarm?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, we have a plan. We're going in there." And I'm thinking that poor guy who's like, "Hey, we're not working with Goonswarm," is about to get raided by Test or Pappy forces. So I wonder what's going to happen there.
Well, it's separate from Rumble Stomp, right? Because just from Pappy numbers alone, and the fact that the Imperium are not officially dedicated to doing any sort of proxy war in Pochven, means that if Pickles and friends are going to rumble stomp into Pochven, they're going to be completely steamrolled, I think.
Yeah, and that's bad news for him. So we'll keep an eye on that.
It's also why he's trying to deny affiliation, right?
Well, it may just be true, and he's trying to set the record straight. Like I take him at his word. He's also running for CSM, right? So he's got a few things going on. We'll see what happens there. Okay, well, that's all our news this week. So we're at 2 hours. So do you guys have any last messages or shout outs or?
Yeah. I think Bayard J of EveUni is planning on streaming the Battleship 1v1 filament that CCP is doing next week. It's in case you don't know, it's a 24-hour only filament, and I think it's on Saturday from Saturday downtime to downtime on Sunday. That's when it ends. And I think he was planning on streaming it as like a sort of a tournament thing, where some people stream their perspective in the EveUni channel, and then they commentate over the Battleship 1v1s. So if you would maybe be interested in taking part in that, I think if you send him like a Discord PM or something.
Yeah, there's also something else to do with the Proving Grounds that Fozzie put out on Twitter. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, there's going to be a special 24-hour only Battleship 1v1 event.
They were going to reward it a certain way, which was interesting.
Yeah, it'll probably be very similar to what they did with the 18-man FFA, where they had an ISK reward when you went in. You got 8 million ISK when you went in, then you got another 8 million ISK when you did a certain amount of damage, which was pretty easy to do in any combat ship, even if you got like blobbed at the start. So, assuming they'll do something similar, like, I don't know, maybe you get 50 million ISK the first time you go in, and 50 million ISK if you do a certain amount of damage. And then that way, you get with the insurance from the battleship, for a Tech 2 battleship, it probably wouldn't be that Tech 2 fit battleship, it probably wouldn't be that bad of a loss.
Right. So you get, it's kind of like insurance. You get a little something back for participating. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Thanks, Utonia. You guys got anything else? Arcia, Caleb?
No, not really.
Yeah, it's kind of a slow news week, right? We really had to...
Yeah, it's also because some of the things that I kind of want to talk about soon is really not matured yet, because that's all the industry and market-related stuff, and I want to do some prepping with crunching a few numbers.
I got you. All right. Well, Arcia, thanks very much. Utonia, thank you. And Caleb, thank you for calling ProGod in the future. And we will leave it there. So, McLeod, thank you very much for being behind the control room and running that video for CCP. Thank you again, CCP, for the information and the outreach to players about the Academy. And that's all we have time for this week. We will see you next time on Talking in Station.